This is session 2 of our Excel training. I'm Dara Dinas with Eastern Plains Economic Development Corporation, and presenting this evening is Adam Jesperson with the Montana Nonprofit Association. We will just get the ball rolling because, as always, there's a lot to cover and only so much time. So stick with us, and Adam, if you want to go ahead and take it away.
Awesome, thanks. Thanks for the brave souls who came back for session 2. My name is Adam Jesperson here with M&A. We're going to kind of march forward from where we were last time. If you were with us on Tuesday, I kind of left you with an offer. If there's something in Excel that you want to know how to do, that I would make space for it. And maybe I'll even do that now at the outset. So we're a small enough group. So if there's a thing that you want to make sure we cover tonight, maybe play a little stump the instructor if we need to. Now's your chance. Now's your chance maybe to turn your camera on, come off mute, or just come off mute if you want to keep your camera off, that's fine. And say, how do I do this? Or here's my issue. How do I do this thing? So I'll give you that offer. We're small, again, we're small enough, and I know there's folks that are gonna be watching this recording. So we're gonna march in, and I think our agenda for tonight, I'm gonna switch over to our exercise file. Again, this is the exercise file that Dara sent out on Tuesday. So the way this works is that we're going to do some work in it on our end. If you have 2 screens, or if you're not eating dinner while you're watching this, or if you want to engage and do some of the work right in tandem as I'm doing it on your computer, feel free to. And then I'm going to send this completed exercise file that has all the work that we've done for this past 90 minutes times 2 sessions to you, or to Dara, who will send it out to you. So you're going to have kind of a pre-file, then a pre-session file, then a post-session file. And that's going to give you, a good sandbox to play around, mess around between those files and this recording, which you'll also have. You should be able to, in 6 months, you're like, I remember Adam talked about that thing, and I can really know how to do it. I really need to know how to do it now. You can go back and watch the recording, play around in the files that we've given you, and get to the result you need. And you also have kind of the completed version of formulas and some things like that. So that's the hope. Again, I'll also express an offer. If at any point in time you have a need for additional help with Excel, reach out to Dara, reach out to me, and I'm happy to help with that. I'm going to put my email in the chat right now, and it's available there. So at any point in the future, if something comes up, please reach out to me. I think I've got the chat open. So as we're working through our stuff tonight, if you have questions, if there are things, or if you get a little bit stuck in the weeds, or you don't know what I did, or you want to see something again, please type in the chat immediately. Say, hey, stop, do that again, slow down. What did you just do? Or that doesn't make sense, whatever it might be. Please feel free to put that in the chat, and that'll cue me, and we'll go back and we'll just kind of do that step again. I'm going to share my screen. This is our exercise file right here. Here's our agenda. You can see it's shorter, but it's definitely not any less packed with information. So we're going to spend we ended last time talking about functions, specific functions in Excel. We did a couple of them. We're going to do a couple more tonight. There are hundreds of functions that you could use in Excel. And one of the common questions people always say is like, how do I know which ones that I need to use? And the answer is I don't necessarily know. But Google is your friend. So if you need to know, if you need to know, basic steps of what you want to accomplish, you could probably Google that, and it'll come up with the pre-built function in Excel that will work to do that thing. What we're teaching here tonight is a few of the common ones that I've used that I think are kind of ubiquitous to small business, ubiquitous to nonprofit, ubiquitous to just kind of doing some basic things in Excel. But I think more importantly, you learning how the formula builder works and learning how to read what we call syntax and just kind of following the steps. Once you know how to do that, you can pull up any Excel function, read the instructions, and kind of go through it step by step and get to the result that you need. So we're gonna do a few more functions, but I want to give us enough time to do what I think are the most fun things in Excel. First, charts and graphs, so visualizations, some nice pretty pictures and analysis of data. And then this thing called PivotTables, which kind of takes the work that we're going to do with functions It makes it obsolete because I can just do it with a couple clicks to create this really high level analytical set of data called a pivot table. So that's where we're headed tonight. Again, use the chat to stop me, to cue me, to ask questions, to redirect, whatever it might be. And we're gonna move forward. So thanks for being here. Dara told me that it's been a blustery few days out east. So I'm sorry about that. That wind can be awful. I told her that it's gorgeous here on the western side of the state. So hopefully let's move in your direction. With that, let's dive in. So we're going to talk about some functions. We ended last time here. I'm going to make my screen a little bit bigger with just some functions and some functionality to manipulate text, to manipulate names specifically. So we worked through this thing called text to columns, where we're able to separate a full name that's in one column. Remember, these are our columns. A is a single column. And we can break it into 2 columns, so then I can sort by last name, I can sort by first name, I could, rekey whatever I need to do, but I've got one name those in 1 column. Now it's in 2. Now I want to show how to work backwards, and how do we combine things that are in multiple columns into 1 column, into 1 cell rather. And that's a function called concatenate. I don't know what it means. I'm sure that there's a dictionary definition of what concatenate means, but it's the name of the function that we're going to do here today. And concatenate, we'll bring up the formal definition for it. So remember, to start a function, you go to the cell where you want the function to exist, the formula to exist, and you always start with an equal sign. That equal sign tells Excel, don't just give me the stuff, don't just regurgitate the information I type in the cell. I need you to do some work. And that work might just mean adding 2 things together, equals 2 + 2 or 5 + 5, or it could be, I want you to use a pre-built function algorithm that's built into Excel to do some analysis, which is what we want to do right here. So we're going to start with equals, and then we're going to go up to our formula bar right here. And we've got this little FX button, which is our insert function button right here next to the equal sign in our function bar, formula bar right here. And I'm going to click that. And it's going to bring up a call out. This is our wizard, our formula builder wizard. This is where all the magic happens. This is what allows us to do some really complicated functions and formulas without having to know all the things we have to type in when. It just walks us through it step by step. If you're on a Mac, your formula builder is going to show up where mine does on the far right side of your screen. If you are on a PC, it's going to be as big as life right in the middle of your screen. So just know that they're going to maybe look a little bit different, but it's all there. Now we need to start, once you get the formula builder, if you just typed in equals and then insert function, you're going to get a list of all of the functions, all of the pre-built functions in Excel right here. And if I just start clicking on these one by one, you can see that below that, I'm getting the definition and the syntax of what that function does. So first it gives me the definition. What does code do? It says it returns a numeric code for the first character in a text string, blah, blah, blah. I don't know what that one is. And below that, it says, here's the syntax, or here's the steps that you need to do to create this function. Every function in Excel is here in this list. And the ones that I've used most recently, and that you may have used most recently, are always going to show up at the top, most recently used, and then all. In this case, I'm just going to find concatenate right here. So concatenate joins several text strings into one text string. It joins information from several cells and puts it into one cell, which is what we want to do. So we're going to take, we broke up the full name, which is in column A here, and we broke it up into 2 columns. Now we have a first name and a last name. Now I want to create a cell that has last name, comma, first name. Because I want to use that in print labels or mailing lists or something like that. Kristen, I see your hand up, please. Go ahead.
Sorry, I should have unmuted before I raised my hand.
That's okay.
I'm not seeing the dialog box. I
Okay.
don't know if anybody else is. Maybe everybody.
Did you, so you clicked in equals, and then did you click this little insert function button right up here?
Right, which generally brings up a dialog box.
Yeah, should bring up something.
And it's not showing it on your screen. I'm not,
Oh, on my screen.
yeah, I'm not following along. I'm just watching.
Okay. Let
I wonder if
me
maybe
s-
you just shared one window or something?
Maybe. Thank you for that. I'm going to try to share. Again, we'll see if this works. Equals concatenate or equals insert function. Are you seeing this
No,
on the right side where it says formula builder?
I am not seeing the formula builder.
Anybody else seeing it?
Yeah, I can see the formula builder.
Well, hey, maybe it's just me.
Can
That's
maybe
fine.
yeah, there might be ways to like zoom your screen in and out. Maybe it's there, but it's, or maybe it's covered by my picture or our pictures. If you move that, maybe. I don't know.
Aha, it is.
Is it covered? Okay.
I was looking for a different,
Yeah,
different
and this
window.
is where, you know, on a Mac, like I said, it's going to be on the right side, kind of tucked in. It's going to be a little less discreet. On a PC, it's going to slap you in the face. It's going to be right in the middle of your screen.
Yeah. And I was looking for the slap in the face.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Thank you. And thanks
Thank
for
you.
the call out. That's exactly what I need, folks. If we're working through this and something's not looking right on your end, do exactly what Kristen did. Raise your hand and we'll stop. We'll take it in real time. Thank you for that. Okay, so we're going to go to equals. We're going to find concatenate again. Concatenate joins several text strings into one. So we want to take those two columns of names, first name and last name, and join them together in a text string that says last name, comma, first name. I'm going to do it a couple times just so you can see how this works and how you can kind of build a text string. So I'm going to double click concatenate and it's going to say, okay, you've got a concatenate function you want to build. Your syntax is really simple. All you have to do is start telling Excel what are the text strings you want to combine. Excel is going to combine them in exactly the way you tell it to combine them. So in this case, I'm going to say text one. I'm going to do this a couple times just so you can see how we build this. Text one is going to be the last name because we want to start with last name. So I'm going to click on text one and then click on G4, the last name. Then text two, I want to be the first name right here. And you can see it's giving me a preview of what my result is going to be. For right now, I'm just going to click done. So I just told Excel to put in G4 and then right next to it, put in F4, G4 comma F4. I could add as many of these as I want. So I could maybe, I'm going to come back in here and add another. And let's just say for the sake of argument, I wanted to put their zip code right after it. And then click that. Now I've got that. So you're combining information from multiple text strings into one. However, I want this to literally say last name, comma, space, first name. So I need to add some characters myself in between the results from G4 and F4, the last name and the first name. So I'm going to remove that zip code there because I don't actually need that. And I'm going to remove this, and I'm actually just going to start over here. So we've got this, and this is where we can tell Excel not just what text strings from elsewhere in the worksheet that we want to combine, but we can actually add characters ourselves and tell it to and add them wherever we would like into this single cell that we're creating. So in this case, we're going to say we want to lead with last name. So we're ARPN right there, G4. Now text two though is not going to be first name because that's what put them right side by side. In this case, we're going to put quotes. When I put a quotes, that tells Excel I'm adding something extra. I just want you to put literally what I keep between these two, between my starting quotes and my ending quotes. So I'm going to put quotes, comma, space, quotes. So I just told Excel to add a comma and a space after the last name. That's text two. Now text three is going to be the first name. So now I have ARPN, comma, space, Kate. Last name, comma, space, first name. I could add, you could add whatever you want here. You could add another one that says space is awesome. Whatever you like. You have the ability to add as many text strings as you want and as many combinations of existing cell data and my own kind of forced information in there. Let me get rid of that. And I'm just going to click done. Now I have ARPN, comma, space, Kate. Again, to copy this, I'm going to get to where I have my black X or black cross in the bottom right corner of this cell. I'm going to click and drag, and it's going to take that all the way down. And now I've taken my first name and my last name, 2 separate columns, and combined them into one cell that is last name, comma, space, first name. This is an example of how we can use that. I've used concatenate in the past to separate address, or to combine address, city, state, zip if I want to combine disparate parts of an address, to make a key. Maybe I need to make a unique key for someone. So a great use for this would be if I've got a list of names, and within those names, there's 10 John Smiths, but they all have different addresses, and I need to remove duplicate entries. There's no single column that has a duplicate that I can say, here's all the duplicates that I need to find, because there might be the same PO box, but they're in a different city, or they might have the same last name, but they have a different address, or they might have the same first name, but they have a different last name, a different address. So there's no way for me to kind of find one cell and say, these are all the duplicates that you need to remove. What you can do is you can create a key where you take multiple columns of data and put them all into one cell. And then as long as that key string is the same, you can say, oh, all my duplicates are here. So as long as you can find, John Smith at 1 First Street in Baker, Montana, if there's 5 of those entries, those are duplicates. Remove those. But you can create a key by taking multiple cells, multiple columns worth of data, putting them into one, and then removing duplicates from that one cell. So that's a great use for concatenate I've used in the past, or something like this, where I just need to kind of refashion names, refashion addresses, refashion information into a format that I want to, so I can pull it apart and pull it back together in whatever form and fashion I'd like. A couple real quick other text functions that we can use that are uber fast. So sometimes I have text that's in the wrong case. It's all lowercase, it's mismatched. Maybe it's all capitalized, and I want to put it into the right case. So upper takes whatever text I has and makes it all uppercase, capital letters. So equals upper, left quote, go to my formula builder. This one's real simple, equals upper, and it says, all right, what's the text you want to turn to uppercase? Come back here and click on this, the cell I just created. Click done. Now I have that name in all uppercase. If I have it in all uppercase and I want to put it back into its proper case, proper will be the capitalized first character of each word. I can put it in a proper case. So I can say equals proper, left parenthesis, go to my formula builder, click on my all caps, oops, equals proper. Moving too fast. Left parenthesis, formula builder, click into my formula wizard, then click into the cell that I want to turn from uppercase into proper, and now click done. And Kate Arpin is back to being proper case. Lower does the same thing where it makes everything lowercase. So those are some quick things you can do if you're using lists of names and you need to start to do some manipulation to get it in the right format for a mailing list or an event list or labels or whatever it might be. I'm going to drag that down, and now I have upper and proper case for all of our staff here at M&A. So some text functions. All right. We're going to do, we talked last time about some if functions. We did some ifs. We did a single if function. We'll go back to it here. An if function is we do a test, logical test. We ask Excel to run some quick math. One cell equals another cell, one cell is greater than another cell, or less than, just a really simple test. If that test comes back as true, return a value. If it comes back as false, return a different value. Then we showed that you could do multiple if statements. So you could say, if this test is true, return a value. If it's false, run another test. And if that's true, return another value. And if it's false, do another test, etc. ad nauseum if you need to. That's how we did this right here, where we are starting to categorize our budget lines as either being on budget or under budget or over budget. We could do that there. But I mentioned that there's other functionality with if statements with if logical tests that allow us to do some different things. We're gonna do a couple of them quickly here, and then I'm gonna park functions, and we're gonna talk about charts and graphs and pivot tables, and we'll come back to functions if we need to. But you're kind of learning the syntax, at least learning some of the basics of how to use some of these functions. So we're gonna come to our logic functions tab, and we have, right with which right now looks to be kind of blank, but we're gonna do some analysis of this master list example that we have right here. Remember, this is a list of every nonprofit in Montana, all 11,132 of them. We want to learn a little bit about what's here, because right now this is raw data. So we want to start with knowing how many nonprofits are in each city in Montana. That's what we want to start with. To do that, first thing I need a list of every city that shows up in this master list, but I only want that city to show up once. So to do that, I'm going to do some copy paste and then remove duplicates. So I'm going to take this city column right here. I'm going to go down to D2. So I'm going to go right below my header. I'm going to use my shortcut that we learned last week, which was Shift Control Down, which highlights every row in that data set. Shift Control Down highlights. Control Down just moves to the bottom, but this highlights from the top of that data set to the bottom. And now I'm going to go Control C to copy. So I'm going to copy all 11,132 records. Now I'm going to come over here to my logic functions tab, go right below the city name right here, and I'm going to right click paste. So now I just pasted all 11,132 records into this other tab right here. You can see I've got duplicate entries. I've got the exact same order and the exact same number that shows up in that other tab down to record 11,132. Now, while it's highlighted, I'm going to go to data and remove duplicates. It's going to say, do you want to expand the selection, which means, do you want me to remove records for the entire tab, or just kind of stay on the highlighted cells that you've selected here, which is what I want to do. I want to continue with the current selection, continue with what's already highlighted, click remove duplicates, and it's going to say, okay, where are the duplicates that you're looking for? In this case, it's the only column that I've selected. It's the city column that I've highlighted, I guess, and I'm going to click OK. And I just removed, 10,787 records, and it kept 344 unique values. So it found one instance of every city name and kept those and removed the rest. So now I have a list that shows every city that shows up in that other list, but only shows every city once instead of showing up, multiple times. Now we get to do some math to figure out how many times does each city actually show up in that other list. But we don't want them to be listed. We want an actual summary of that. I'm gonna get rid of my highlight here. That was from last time. There we go. So the first thing we want to do, now we have a list that's 344 cities long. It's every city that shows up in that other list listed once. And we want Excel to tell us how many times, how many records are there for each city on that other list, all 11,000 plus records. To do that, we're going to use what's called a count if. A count if uses if, which is the logical test, and we're going to tell Excel, find a city name and count how many times it shows up in that other spreadsheet, in that other tab, worksheet, I should say. So to start this, we're going to say equals count if left parenthesis, and then click our formula builder right up here. So the definition of this, count if, counts the number of cells within a range. A range is either a single row or a series of rows and columns. It's an array, it's a table, it's another set of records somewhere else. Counts the number of cells within a range that meet the given condition. So the given condition is the test we're going to ask it to do. In this case, the syntax then is give me the range, tell me which cells you want me to look at, and then give me the criteria. What do you want me to find within that range of cells? In this case, the range is going to be in that other worksheet, the other tab. We can create functions that reference data that are in other tabs, other worksheets, and in other files altogether, as long as they're open and available to be viewed. You can go somewhere else and find data somewhere else. So in this case, the range is going to be our city column in our master list example worksheet. So I'm going to click in here, click on my master list example, go to the city column, and I'm not going to have to highlight all of them. I can just go up here to where it says column D, and it gives me that little down arrow. And I click that, and now I've highlighted the entire column down to row 1 million, whatever it is, everything in that column. And you can see that I've done the whole column because it says my range is now master list example, column D to column D, the whole thing. It's not row 1 to row 10 or row 1 to row 1000. It's the whole thing, the whole column. So I just told Excel, go look in master list example, city column, the whole thing. And what's my criteria? In this case, my criteria is going to be Absarki right here, the city name, A4, back in the worksheet that we're building to build this data table. And I'm going to click done. So you can see that it went to that other tab. It looked at column D and it counted Absarki 26 times. So it's 26 organizations that exist in the city of town of Absarki in Montana. Now to copy that down, I'm going to go to the bottom here, and I'm going to double click, and now I've got the whole stinking thing, all 344 records, all 344 city names, and a count of how many times those city names show up in that other column, in that other worksheet. You can see Missoula has 1,620. Let's do Glendive. Glendive has 102. Baker has 45. So you can see that we've got some pretty cool math that tells us a lot more than just looking at that record, that spreadsheet of 11,000 records. We're going to do a couple more. There's also a function called count ifs, which says it's just like count if, but it allows you to do multiple criteria. So in this case, we want to know out of those 26 records in Absarki, how many of those are C3s? Remember we talked about with nonprofits, there's 501c3s, and there's 501c6s and C9s and C12s, all these different classifications. Most common is a C3. That's what we're most familiar with as a public charity. But there are all these other instances as well. I want to know out of these 26 records, how many are C3s? So I'm going to go to my master list example. I'm going to highlight column D just for our own purposes here. And then this column H right here, where it says subsection, that's where it's denoting whether it's a C3 or a C7 or a C6 or a C12 or a C19, et cetera. So I want to know how many organizations are actually C3s in each of these cities across Montana. I could count them, right? Like I could go to Absarki and find the 26 records and count the threes, but there's a faster way to do it. It's called the count ifs function. I'm gonna go back to our logic functions, and it's just like count ifs, but it's count ifs equals count ifs, insert function. Now it says count ifs counts the number of cells, just like the count if, specified by a given set of conditions or criteria, multiple conditions. So first, our syntax is a little bit different, and that the first thing it's going to ask for is the range, just like it. I guess that's the same, but we're looking for probably multiple ranges here and multiple criteria. So first thing it's going to ask for is criteria range 1. So what's the first condition that we were trying to meet, and where would I find that condition? So it's going to be the exact same as we did. We're going to go to the city first. So we're going to build a city, go to criteria range 1, go to our master list example, highlight column D, our city column, go to the plus sign, and it says, okay, what's now the criteria? So you gave me the range, the city column. What's the criteria? In this case, it's Absarki, or the city name that exists here. Now, what's criteria range 2? You can have as many criteria as you want here. So you can get this down to like a really niche little number, really drill down. But in this case, we just want 2 criteria. In this case, our criteria 2 is going to be back here in my master list example, and it's going to be the subsection, this guy right here. So I'm going to highlight that whole column. So I said, go to go to the city names, find the city that we specified. Now go to the subsection, and what's my criteria here? Instead of referencing a cell, I'm just going to say quote 3 quote. Find everywhere where you find the number 3 in column H of the master list example worksheet. So we've got find city name of Zorky, find all the 3s, and just give me the results that reflect both, that have the city name and our 3s. I click that and you can see there's 19. So out of the 26 records in Zorky, 19 are C3s. If I double click on this, it's going to take that all the way down to the bottom. So you can see we've got, in Anaconda, there's 83 organizations, 55 are C3s, et cetera, et cetera. These numbers are always going to be smaller because it's a narrower set of criteria, right? We're narrowing in. You could have as many criteria as you want here. So I could go back and say, in addition to this, just give me organizations that have income above 0 or that are highlighted purple, or whatever it is, whatever criteria may exist in that other worksheet. I could really drill this down and use as many ranges and criteria as I want to using COUNTIFs. They're all the same, where you just give it the range, give it the criteria, give it the range, give it the criteria, and you can drill this down into as narrow as you'd like. Okay, we're going to do this one, and then I'm going to call it good because I want to give us, and we'll come back and do the rest of these after we talk about graphs, charts, and pivot tables. It's another if function. So we talked about COUNTIFs, where it looks into a set of data, a range, and it counts the number of records that you specify. There's also one that's called SUMIFs, where it takes, or SUMIF, I guess, and SUMIFs, but SUMIF finds those criteria, finds the city names, just like we asked it to, and then it goes to a different row or a different column within that data set, and it adds up the values that you tell it to add up. So it adds instead of counts. It adds numeric values instead of counting raw values. I'll tell you what we mean by that. So we're going to go equals SUMIF, left parenthesis, open up my formula builder, and it's giving me our syntax here. So the definition, SUMIF adds the cell specified by a given condition or criteria. So adds values up instead of counting them. In this case, it's going to ask just for our range and criteria, just like the COUNTIFs did. We're going to do the same thing. So in this case, I should say we're trying to define. I'm going to start over. I'm going to show you what we're trying to define. Over here in our master list example, if I scroll all the way over to the right side, we have a column that says income amount. So this tells me how much income do all of these nonprofits generate per year, or that they've submitted, how much income they've generated. So I want to know by city, for those 26 organizations in Zorky, what kind of revenue or income do those organizations generate? So we're going to go back here. Now we're going to do our SUMIFs, or SUMIF equals SUMIF, left parenthesis, insert function. First thing it's going to do is ask for a range and criteria, just like what we just did. We're asking it to look at the city names and narrow down on cities that correspond to the criteria that is showing up here. So we're going to go to our master list example. We're going to click the city. The criteria is going to be the exact same. It's going to be the city name right here, Zorky. And that's where we would have ended if it was a COUNTIF, and it would just count the records, right? SUMIF, though, says, okay, we've done that. Now, what other range of cells do you want me to look at to add up certain values? In this case, it's that income amount column that I had on the far right side of that worksheet. So I'm going to click on sum range, go to my master list example, go all the way over here, and I'm going to click this. So I just told Excel, look at column D, find all the instances of each city name. When you find that record, go to column X and add that value and add up all the values for those particular cities. And I'm going to click done. And those 26 organizations in Zorky generated income annually of $460,000. I'm going to double click and do it for all 344 cities that are listed. So you can see pretty quickly, I mean, just with a few keystrokes, 3 functions, we've got some really cool analysis of a relatively large data set. It's telling us some cool information just by using a COUNTIF and a SUMIF. These are really powerful functions. You just give it a quick test, a quick criteria, and you can count, you can add. There's an average ifs if you want to do an average value. There's a max if. You can say, give me the set of criteria, and then give me the maximum value that shows up or a minimum value that shows up. So there's all these if functions. I think maybe let's just look at all of the if functions. I'm gonna go to insert function, show them all. And I'm just gonna start typing in if. There's if, of course. It's just if they start with if. Yeah, that didn't work. Sorry. There are a lot of ifs, but they're all based off the same thing. You telling Excel, run a test, run a quick logical test, find a criteria, match a criteria, find something that's bigger than or smaller than something else, and then in response to that, do something. Count the records, add the records up, give me an average, whatever it might be. There's a lot of power in these as long as you're trying to figure out how to break down larger data sets into something that's meaningful for you and your work. So we might come back to these if we can get there. I'm going to set these aside. Are there any questions about COUNTIF or SUMIF? And would you like to see those again? If you would, type in chat, hey, could you do that one more time? Or any questions you may have. I'll give you a minute or 15 seconds. Okay, thanks, Kristen. All right, we're going to pivot, not in the pivot tables yet, but we're going to pivot. We're going to talk about charts and graphs, which is how do I make a visualization of data that I have? We're going to do a couple of them here. We're going to do a bar graph, bar chart, I should say, column chart. It's kind of the same thing. And then we're going to show you a pie chart, but kind of similar to the functions. Once you know the basics of how these are constructed, which we're going to show you how to construct them, you can build any graph that looks like anything. And Excel is actually pretty intuitive at creating these for you. The big key when you're creating charts and graphs is, if at all possible, get the data that you're trying to put into a chart, get it next to each other. Don't try to pull things from 3 different spreadsheets into one. If you're going to do that, actually copy and paste that data into one continuous set of data. This right here that I have, where I've got 3 months worth of data and I've got categories and I've got totals, this is a great format for creating a chart or a visualization from Excel. Because if you have your data arranged well, Excel will know what you're trying to build and it will do it for you intuitively, instead of you having to build it from scratch and go step by step and create it yourself. So that's if I can give you no better word of advice for visualizations, for charts and graphs, get your data into a format where it's readable by Excel. And I'll show you that right here, right now. So if I want to create a bar chart of this table right here, I've got my budget, I've got what I spent in certain categories for the past 3 months, and I want to do a visualization. I want to show it a nice, pretty chart, pretty graph. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight the data that I want to be included. Notice that I'm not highlighting my totals here or my total here, because having those totals kind of skews everything. Now, you may want that included, and we'll show you what that might look like, but you probably don't. You probably just want the month to month. So highlight only what you want to be shown in a graph. And now I'm going to go to insert, and about halfway over here, I've got this whole group of information here where it says charts and graphs. So first it's going to say recommended charts. This is the first button you should push when you want to create something in Excel. Once you get your data in a way where it's readable by Excel, where it's organized and it's in continuous columns and continuous rows and organized in a way that I can access it, Once I click recommended charts, Excel is going to say, I know what you're trying to do. And I know the type of data that you're looking at, and here's what I can recommend. If I had data in 4 different places, or if I had like 3 blank columns worth of data between my data sets or blank rows or things like that, where it wasn't pulled together, my recommended charts would say, I can't recommend anything. I don't know what you're trying to build, in which case you're gonna have to start from scratch and you have to build it yourself. We're gonna tell you how to do it, but it's so much easier to do it this way. So let's do a quick recommended chart. We have a clustered column. We have a stacked column. We have a stacked area, a clustered bar, a stacked bar, etc. We've got all these options that we can create. I'm just gonna create this one right here, clustered column. Double click and boom, I've got a visualization. I have my budget categories separated by month. So my legend, my key is month, and my categories are right here. First thing in Excel, if you are trying to create a graph and you go to the recommended graph or chart, whatever you want to call these, and it doesn't show up as you want it to, maybe it's backwards. Maybe you wanted, I actually wanted my months grouped together and I wanted them broken out by category. The first thing that you should try, if it's not looking like it should, but it's close, is this button right here that says switch row and column. And it's going to switch your inputs. It's going to grab your inputs and just switch them. So first thing to do is just click this. I click it once and look what happened. Now I have my budget categories here and my months on my x-axis. So it flipped. So first thing you should try, if it doesn't look how you want it, but it's close, is just the switch row and column right there. That's the first thing I would definitely try. From there, the heartbeat of, kind of the back end operations of building these charts and graphs is this button right here that says select data. This is where I start to really get in and tell Excel how many series, what's the y-axis, what's the x-axis, what's the data we're looking at. This is where I would build it from scratch if I had to. In this case, I don't have to because I have information here, but I'll go through what this is. So first is my chart data range, which is those things I highlighted. So it goes from A2 to D7. I just highlighted, the things that I wanted. So that's the whole thing. Then I have my legend series right here. So these are the series that I can build. I can use the plus to add series. I can use the minus to subtract series. We'll come back and we'll actually do one of those. Beside that, then I have, okay, what's the series name? What's the name of this? This is what's going to go in the legend. This is how you're going to name that vertical bar that's blue or orange or whatever. In this case, it's going to be, and you can also see as I'm moving around here, once I click into this cell, Excel's going to highlight with this little blinking line around the cell that I've highlighted, so you can see what it is that you're referencing. So in this case, this series is April 22, which is what I want it to be. My Y values are these guys right here, these values. My horizontal, so Y values is what's going to, what value is going to be displayed on my vertical column. And my horizontal values, these are our categories. So this is what's going to show up on the bottom, my horizontal axis, my X axis. In this case, it's going to be A3 through A7. So you can see what the inputs are. Notice I also have this little switch row and column button here, just like I did before. So if I want to flip this on its head and show these categories and have my horizontal axis be months, I can do that. I can flip flop right here as many times as I'd like to get the data to display as I would like. But this is where we tell Excel exactly what data we're looking at. In this case, I'm going to go back here and I'm actually going to remove 2 of these series. I'm going to click OK. Now I just have 1 month's worth of information. So maybe you don't have information pulled together nicely. So you've got to go and find it and add it. So we started with 1 month's worth. We're going to click on select data and we want to add 2 more series to this. So to do that, I'm going to click this little plus sign right here that tells us we want to add a new series. I don't have to mess with the chart range here if I don't want to. I can leave that where it is because that's going to be added when I add the series. But I need to add the name. So this is what's going to show up in the legend. We're going by months here. So the name of this next one is going to be March. So I'm just going to click in this cell and then click the cell that I want it to reference. And the Y values, I'm going to delete that, are going to be these right here. You could actually key in values if you wanted to. You could say they're 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, whatever it might be. In this case, I have the values stored in Excel. They're right here. And my horizontal axis is going to be these guys right here, just like it was for the series previous. Now I can add I'm going to click OK. And I added a series. I now had February, I added March. Now we have to add April. I'm going to click select data. I'm going to click the plus sign. The name of this series is going to be April. My Y values are going to be the April values. And my horizontal X axis labels are going to be the same as they were for the previous two. Salaries down to travel. And now click OK. And I recreated those three series right there. So that's this select data button is where you can start to build whatever you'd like. And regardless of what kind of a chart it is, whether it's this kind of a clustered column or a bar or a stacked or an area or a line or whatever it is, it functions the exact same way. You put in the inputs, you tell it what's the range, you say, what are my series names, the legend names, what are the Y-axis values, and what are the X-axis categories? Functions the exact same way. It only functions different for a pie chart because a pie chart is only one series of data, which we'll get to that in a second. So now I have this. Let's say that this is the format that I wanted, where I have my budget categories and the months, and I can see differences between the two. Now I can really start to fine tune what this looks like, and there's some preset options up here at the top. Excel always has preset options, so I could change them here and kind of change some of the look and feel. I'm going to go back to, I'm just going to undo all those. I don't like any of those. We're going to go back to where we started. This is the default, or you can customize it totally, and that's what we're going to go through now. So first of all, on the left side, you have this button that says Add Chart Elements. This is where I can add or subtract anything that's showing on the chart as it exists. First of all, and you can see things that are turned on have a little checkbox by them. And I can turn those on or turn those off. So my axes are turned on. That's my my dollar figures going up vertically, and my X-axis category names on the bottom. I can turn them off if I don't want the category to be labeled. You probably do. It doesn't really say much without that, but I could turn these on and off if I would like. I'm going to turn them both on. I could add a title for each axis. In this case, for my horizontal, let's add a title and call this expense categories. I could add a title for my vertical axis. Dollars, right there. So I added those. I could add a chart title above on the top. Right now there's none. I could have it be above or kind of centered. Above, we'll put it, you see how it went above my horizontal lines? Or I could say I want it centered, where it's going to be kind of right over the top of it. I'm going to do this one, and I'm going to say this is business expenses by month. Right there. I could add labels. So right now, you know, I can see what the values are because I've got my axis, but I could actually put the specific label on it. So I could say, you know, label it in the center. That's kind of busy. Maybe let's label it inside the end. That's still kind of busy. Let's label it outside the end. That's a little bit better. Label it as a data call out. That's probably worse. Let's go back and do this outside the end. There, that one right there. Once I have this, so I've got labels, I can still move them if I want. So I told Excel where to put them to begin with, but I could still come in here and say, you know what, I can't read any of these. So I'm going to move this up. Come on, you can move. There you go. Move that up a little bit. Why aren't you moving? There you go. Move this one up. Wants to move it twice, I guess, tonight. So they're all visible. You know, I have control over that on an individual basis. Actually, that's why. There we go. Now I can see all the information a little bit more easily. What else can we do with our elements? So we have data labels, we have a data table. So if we wanted all the data to actually be shown in addition to the visualization, I could add a data table that shows it all right here as well. We could add error bars. So some, you know, if you've got a line graph or you've got some different points on there, error bars make sense. That's kind of a statistical thing. You could have those. You could add grid lines. So right now we have our primary horizontal lines. You can see that 3,500, 3,000, etc. We could add minor horizontal lines. You can see they're kind of grayed out, but they're there. We could have primary vertical lines to kind of block this out a little bit better. And maybe we want to add minor vertical lines. So now we've got this really tight grid thing going on. We could have our legend. So right now we have our legend down here. We could turn it off if we want to, or we're not going to tell us which month we're talking about. We probably want something, so we could have it be on the right side, the top side, left side, or the bottom. I liked it on the bottom where it was, so we'll put it back. And then if you've got a line graph or some kind of a scatter plot, if you wanted a trend line that show what the trend is over time, you could do that with some different categories here. So these are all the elements that you can add and really customize what it is that you're trying to look at. Quick layout kind of does the same thing as the preset options, but it gives you some preset ability to get it kind of how you want it and then tweak it from there. And I can still tweak more. So we've got this. It's starting to look kind of pretty. It's kind of looking like we want it to. But let's say that I want to change, I don't like this gray color right here. I want to change the color of my April bar. I want you to note what happens when I click in here. So when I click once, notice that all of my April column or all of my April bars are selected. They've got these little dots around the outside. So I've selected all of them by clicking once. If I click twice, now I'm just in this one column, this one value right here. I'm gonna do that again. So if I click once, I've got the whole thing. Now, if I click again, I'm just that one value. So if I wanted to make changes to color, to size, to whatever it might be, if I click here once, I'm making a change to the whole series, to all of April. If I click again, I'm just changing this one record. So let's show you what that looks like. So I'm going to click in here once. I'm going to right click and I'm going to say Format Data Series. I've got some options. So I can change the overlap for the width of how this shows up. I could change kind of the edge of this or get to some kind of fancy preset options. But if I just come over here to this is where I can change the fill color and change the border. So in this case, let's change the fill color to be bright green. And let's change the border to be a solid line that's really big. 5 points. 3 points, that looks tacky. There we go. I'm gonna close this. Now you can see that I just changed that whole series so that I've got green fill with a blue around the outside. Now I'm gonna just, let's say that, you know, that's how I wanted it, but I wanna change this one value right here, the April value. I wanna call this out specifically. So I'm gonna click once, click twice, right click and go to Format Data Point. And now I wanna change this. I want this to really stand out to be bright red. So now I've got a bright red line for that series, even though the rest of them are green. Maybe you want to really draw attention to that one in your presentation. So again, the series is first, the point is second. You can click anywhere in here and right click and format what it is that you're seeing. So for example, maybe on my vertical axis here, let's format the axis. A nice thing to do sometimes in here is to change the minimum and maximum values that are being shown. So it's going to automatically size so that it fits the lowest value and the highest value, but sometimes we might want to change that. So in this case, we could say, you know, the maximum value here is 3,000. You give me 3,500 just to kind of expand it a little bit, but I really only want you to go up to 3,000. Don't go any higher than that. It's going to resize. Or I could say, I want my minimum to be minus 500. I want to go below 0. And you see it went below 0. So you can change the parameters of your axis right here by just right-clicking on the axis, going to format. It's going to be one of your options up here. I'm going to go back to 0 for my minimum. You can change the units of scale. So maybe my major unit is going to be 1,000 instead of 500. There you go. And now I just go 1,000, 2,000, 3,000. And my minor, instead of being 200, is going to be 500. So I'm going to kind of expand this out a little bit. You have full control over really tweaking this and narrowing it into something that's meaningful for you and how you want it to show. Same thing on your x-axis, etc. There's no limit to the amount of detail that you can get on these. Okay, so let's say that I've created the chart that I want. It's good. It's as good as it's going to get. And now I want to put it into a PowerPoint or a Word doc or an email or something else. I need to transport this somewhere else. You've got a couple options. First is just to copy and paste. So I could right click, copy, and open up PowerPoint. In this case, I'm just going to open up a new worksheet and right click, paste. Notice it got smaller because I'm zoomed out. I can resize this to whatever I want, make it bigger if I need to. What you'll notice though is if I click in here, there's still full control to edit and format all of this if I would like to. So this might be in PowerPoint, which means that this graph is still reading my original data set. It's still looking back at Excel and formatting itself based off of the data that I have stored back there, which can be helpful sometimes. So I can still make changes. So if I were to come back here to my budget example and change a value, maybe let's change this one, my salaries from March to be 5,000 instead. Notice that I rescale this and now I'm off the scale here. This orange bar is off the scale. And if I go to my new sheet that I just created somewhere, this guy, there it is. You can see that I'm off the scale here as well. It changed. Sometimes you want that. Sometimes, you know, I'm creating data, I'm creating a table or a graphic, and I'm making changes on the fly, or I'm going to update it next month, whatever it might be. Sometimes that's good. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes I want to create it as it is, and I want it to stay static. Don't move. So I'm going to undo that 5,000, go back to 3,000. So if I want it to be flat, what I would call flat, which means non-editable, not able to move around, I'm going to right click, copy, go to the place that I want to paste it at, and I'm going to right click, paste special, paste picture. Now notice if I click in here, I can't click in here. It's just flat. And as I resize this, it resizes the whole thing instead of just resizing the outer boundary and leaving all these the same. So I can still come in here and make changes to all these. I can't make any changes to these now because it's a flat picture. Just like I took a picture and now it's static. Sometimes this is as how I want it. Like now I can put it into a PDF, I put it in a Word doc, a PowerPoint, and it's flat. I can change the data back on the original data set and it's not going to change this. It's how I want it. Don't change it, leave it where it is. So you can paste it as a interactive chart, which is just copy paste. That's the default. Or I could paste it as a picture, in which case I've got no ability to change it now into the future, which may be what you want. All right. So, you know, once I have a data set here that I want to create a visualization with, I can go into insert. I can create vertical bars, stacked bars. I can create lines. I can create anything that I want. There's all kinds of options here. They all function the exact same way. Select the data, find the series, get it how you want it. I'm going to do one more. I'm going to do a pie chart because it's probably the only one that kind of functions differently. There's some that get kind of weird. but pie chart's kind of a basic one, but it looks a little bit different. So if I highlight all this information right here and I click a 2D pie, I get not what I asked for. So I've got 3 months worth here and I've got salaries. So Excel said, all right, you gave me all this data, and you want a pie chart. I can't create a pie chart with 3 series and all this information right here. There's too much data to fit into one pie, right? It doesn't work that way. So if I come up here to chart design, which is where all this information is, and click select data, you can see, look at what Excel is displaying. Salaries for February, March, April. What is it actually showing here? What's available? All of the data that I highlighted. With Excel, with a pie chart, as you probably know, you can only do one series. You can only get one series to show, and it's gonna make a pie out of the sum of all of them, make 100% of everything to make a complete pie. So in this case, I wanna actually switch this, flip it, maybe. I wanna get rid of 2 of these. I'm gonna click OK. There we go. Now I have what I need. So I've got one series. So I've got the month of February and all the categories equal to the whole, equal to the sum. It works the exact same way. I've got my series name, my Y values, my X values now are just what shows up in the legend down here. My Y values are just the slice of the pie. And then I can add or subtract the same. You can see I have more limited chart elements. I can add a label, or I can add, I don't have axes now. I don't have trend lines. I don't have any of that information, but there's some information I can put in here. So it functions the same way, just with limited information. So make sure if you're trying to build a pie chart that you're giving it the amount of information that it can stomach, that it can use. If you put too much, it's not going to be shown. Excel is going to just show what it can and go from there. We're a little past 6:30. I want to give us enough time for pivot tables. Questions about charts and graphs? Anything you want to see again? Thanks for hanging with me. Okay. Last thing we want to cover, and we're going to use a different tab here, the one that says sales list. It's something called a pivot table. A pivot table is an interactive summary of data that is quick to pull together. And it's called a pivot table because you can kind of change the inputs that you wanted to show really quickly. You can pivot and show different information, add to it, subtract to it, without having to use any functions or formulas at all. Pivot table works by aggregating and combining the information that you have in columns. So make sure your data is arranged with columns and column names, and make sure that you don't have any blank columns, same as with charts and graphs. Make sure your data is in continuous columns with no blanks in between things, and that it's arranged by column, like we've done with the master list example and like we're doing with this spreadsheet right here. So this is something I found on Excel. It's kind of just a sample spreadsheet. I'm going to bold my top categories. I'm going to make it so I can see everything, just like we learned last week, or on Tuesday rather. This is kind of a sales list of some product. I think it's a car company that sells cars in different segments across the world in different countries. So we have information about their sales. We have their units, the price. Wherever I see a price, I'm going to turn it into a dollar sign. The sales price, any discounts, total sales, cost of goods sold, profit. We have a date field. Notice that our date field is just raw numbers. Remember last week or on Tuesday, we talked about Excel stores individual dates as unique numbers. And to turn it into a date, I just need to make sure that my format up here is actually telling it that it's a date. Turn it to short date and notice that it changed from that raw number into a date. Then we've got a month number, a month name, and a month year. So a breakdown of the specific date into day, month, year. And back here we have the country that sales took place in, and the segment that took place in. So we've got the government segment, mid-market, enterprise, et cetera. So there's kind of all, and then the product name right here. So it's a list of a lot of different types of sales that happen for this company across different channels and countries and discounts and all these things and over time. We want it to start to tell us some information about what's happening with this business and their sales. And to do that, we're going to create a pivot table. To create a pivot table, we need to first highlight all the data that we want to be displayed in that pivot table. We know how to do this. We did this on Tuesday. To highlight a whole data set, we go to the uppermost left cell in that data set. We click Shift, Control, Right, which highlights all the way to the far right side of that data set. And then we go Shift, Control, Down. Highlight right, highlight down. Now I've highlighted all the columns and all the rows that exist within this data set that we want to analyze. So I'm just highlighting everything. Now I'm going to go to Insert and Pivot Table. Insert, Pivot Table. You could, maybe I'm going to start with nothing. I'm not going to do that step first of highlighting. I'm just going to go straight to Insert, Pivot Table. And the first thing it asks is, what's the table range that we want to look at? In this case, it's what we just did. And it did it for me because I think I just did it. But I'm going to delete this out. So I'm going to click in here and I would go A1, Shift Control Right, Shift Control Down. Now I've highlighted that whole data set. So I told Excel, create a pivot table off of these cells. And the next thing is, where do you want this pivot table to go? On an existing worksheet, in which case you have to specify the worksheet and the location. Or as a default, create a new worksheet and put it there. That's kind of what I usually go to, is create a new worksheet and put it there. So I'm going to click OK. And you'll notice at the bottom, I have a new worksheet now. It says Sheet 2. I'm going to rename it Pivot Table. And I have this little thing right here that looks like not much. And I have this. This is what I have. And notice at the top, I've got two new icons or two new words in my toolbar: Pivot Table Analyze and Design. Notice that once I click out of this little nondescript box, those go away. I click back into it and they come back. Pivot Table Analyze, Pivot Table Design. This is where we do, just like with charts and graphs, this is where all the magic happens, where we do all the work for these pivot tables. Once I'm here, I can start building the pivot table, building the information in the order in which I want it to show and be analyzed. To do that, we have to turn on what's called the field list. It showed up automatically when I first came to this tab. You probably saw it. But if you need to turn it on and off, it's this button right up here under Pivot Table Analyze, Field List. This is the nerve center of a pivot table right here. You'll notice when I've got my field list, I've got 4 boxes down here: filter, columns, rows, and values. We're going to define those and show how those work. And then above it, I have all the field names that I can use. You'll notice that these field names are all of my columns from my other worksheet. So I've got the segment, the country, the product, all those things that we walk through, they're all listed here. This is why you need your data organized in columns and with columns that are right next to each other. If you have a blank column, Excel is going to say, we can't do that. We can't make a pivot table. They all have to be next to each other. They all have to have unique names. You can't have 2 columns with the same name. And your data needs to be arranged in clean columns. And then you're going to get this, where you have all of your columns combined and listed right here. And this is where we're going to start to use those columns and arrange them into these 4 boxes here to create a pivot table that does some summary information. So let's look back at our sales list for a second. I'm going to go to the top. Some things that I might want to know as I look at this. I think the first thing that I might want to know is, let's just say how many sales they have per year. So we've got our dates and we've got sales right here. So just give me a summary of how many sales you might have per year. So I'm going to come to my pivot table and I'm going to say the first thing that the base thing that we want to use when we're building a pivot table is this rows column, this rows box right here. So we said we want to do sales by year. So I want to grab the year, my year name right here, and I'm going to just click it and drag it down into rows. Click it and drag it into rows. And you'll notice that my pivot table went from this kind of weird nondescript box to now I've got a box that shows, just like when we built that other table, it shows all of the years that are included in that other tab, other worksheet, but only once. So there's 2 years that are shown there, 2013 and 2014. Now I want to know how many sales they had in each of those years. So a sales thing like that, a total like that is going to be a value. It's the value you want to display. So in this case, I want to grab sales, click it, and drag it down here to values. And now you can see that I have, that's a kind of a big, weird number. I'm going to remove that one. I want to do units sold. How many units did they sell each year? So grab units sold, bring it down here. And I've got a number. I've got, in 2013, they sold, I'm going to turn that into a number that I can read. 2013, they sold 264,000 units. 2014, they sold 861,000 units. So real quickly, I got some information that's usable to me. Looking at that raw data, now I know a little bit more about it. The thing about a pivot table is once you get that information, you go, okay, that tells me something, but doesn't tell me everything. I want to know more. And I can start to layer in some information here. So let's look back at our sales list. So we know how much was sold each year. Let's say, well, how much of each product did they sell each year? This is our product column right here. Let's go back to our pivot table and let's say, okay, we have the year. Now let's find the product right here and let's drag that in below the year. Now I have 2013 sales and below that sales by product, 2014 sales and below that sales by product. So I'm getting more information, right? And I could, whatever is shown here on the right side is exactly how it's going to be shown in the pivot table. So I might say I want to go year first and then product as a subtotal, or I might say, I want the product names first and the years as a subtotal. So I'm going to right click and say, move that up, move the product up and have year beneath it. So now I have the product name with the years here, product name, years, et cetera, down to my grand total at the bottom. I'm going to flip that back. I want to put my year back on top and now I've got my product and we're layering it in. Kind of like, you can see like this is the exact kind of thing we did with our count if and sum if, but it's a whole lot easier, isn't it? What else can we do? So let's look, what else do we want to know from the sales list? So we've got the year, we've got the product. How about country and then segment? So let's really dial this in. How much of each product did they sell and in what country did they sell them? So now we've got year, product, country. We're narrowing it down. Let's say, actually, I think I want country first. So I'm going to drag it. I'm actually going to right click and move it to the top, move it to the beginning. And maybe I don't care about year anymore. I'm going to right click and remove that one. Now I have by country first and product within that. Or I can, again, flip this on its head and say, actually, I'd rather see product by country. So product first and then country. You can see how you can start to pivot. It's the same information, it's the same data, but we're pivoting around the totals to show it in a different way because it tells us a much different story depending on what we're showing and the order in which we're showing it. So now I've got my product names by country right here, and I've got my units sold right here. So you can add in as many layers to this as you would like that makes sense to you, that makes sense to what you're trying to show. We can also add as many values or columns as we might want to see. So right now I have units sold. Let's say that I want to see total sales. I said we weren't going to do that, but let's do total sales right here. So I'm going to drag that down. And I'm going to make sure that I'm going to highlight this and turn it into a currency, get rid of my decimals. So I can see that, we sold the Montana 154,000 units totaling $15 million in sales. And here's how that's broken down by country. I could also say, let's, grab sales right here, and I'm going to bring it down again. And let's say instead of just showing the sum of sales, which is the same thing I did before, I want to see like, what was the average sale, the average line there. So I can right click on sum of sales here. If I right click on this and go to the field settings, so I'm now into the settings for this one value field, I can have it be a sum, I can have it be a count. We're just going to count the number of records that it's working with, the average, which is what I want to do, the maximum sale, the minimum sale, the product, the standard deviation, et cetera. There's all these little niche things that you could have shown. In this case, let's just do an average. And again, this is going to be a currency right here. Get rid of that. There we go. So now I know that this Montana, we had 154,000 units sold. Here was total sales, and the average sale was $165,000. And here's how that changes by country. So you can see that there were much bigger sales in Germany versus Mexico. And we had more pretty consistent sales across the board. And Germany actually had fewer sales, but it had more. Each sale was worth more. And you know, you get the point. Like, there's some really high level useful analysis that we're able to do without a single function, without having to do any math on our own, just by grabbing the information, finding all of our segments here, and then just starting to drag things around and layer things on as I might want to see them. A couple other features of pivot tables. We have these filters. So this function's just like the filters when we had them in our tables on Tuesday, where I might say, I want to be able to filter by segment. Notice when I brought segment down, now I get this little box up here that says segment. So from this, I could say, here's the whole kit and caboodle, all the product sales that we have. Just show me, just show me government sales. So now here's government sales as a subset, but it's broken down by product name and by country, and with sum of sales and average sale right here. Or just show me government and mid-market. It's going to add that in. So you can start to get some subsets of information, building some really good. So my kind of standard operating procedure when I'm working with data is that I'm going to ask for all the data, just import everything into a spreadsheet, put everything into a pivot table, and then start to break down what I have. Instead of just giving me little snippets of information, give it all, and then build a pivot table, and build a pivot table that I can come back to and manipulate and analyze right in the moment, so that when I'm in a meeting with a stakeholder or a client or a funder or the bank, whoever it might be, I can show them the report and they say, well, that's interesting. What about this? I don't know, what about that? Let's see. And I just move some things around, turn some filters on and off, and my pivot table looks like a whole new data set. Let's turn that filter off. I could have multiple filters, just like I have multiple rows and multiple values. I could have, you know, let's do month name as an example. So just show me sales in January or sales in June of both years, whatever it might be. Multiple filters, multiple rows, multiple columns and values. It's worth your time if you've got data that you want to try to analyze to start to try to build a pivot table with it. And this is how you do it. You turn your field list on and off, and you go to work. You can also create a pivot chart, which is a visualization of exactly what you're seeing over here. And when I say exactly what you're seeing, I mean literally exactly what's being shown. So you can see that I have my product names, my countries. If I start to collapse these, you see I have these little minus signs and plus signs. As I collapse these, they're being collapsed on my pivot table, or my pivot chart rather. And as I expand them, they expand there as well. I can format this then exactly as I formatted the other visualization. It's all there for me. But you can start to make a visualization of what I'm seeing, but it's interactive and it changes as I change the information that I'm looking at. Couple other features that I want to show on pivot tables. Up here in the pivot table analyze button right here. First of all, if you create a pivot table and you have it exactly as you want it, let's say that it's on quarterly information, quarterly sales, or quarterly client list, whatever it might be, and you want to keep that for the next quarter or add the next quarter to it once you get that information, all you have to do, this is all created, it's all set up. All you have to do is go back to the data, the raw data that you are using to build a pivot table with, copy or either delete this whole thing and copy in the brand new import, or add to the bottom of this the new data that you want to see. And then you'll come back here and go to pivot table analyze and change data source and just select the new data that you want to show. and it's going to update to show the pivot table in that exact same way with the new data that you're showing. So it's highly interactive, it's updatable at a moment's notice, and it's a great way to visualize information and have that analysis right there at your fingertips for exactly when you need it. Couple last things. Next to our refresh and change the data source, how we figure out which data we're looking at, there's the ability to insert a slicer and insert a timeline. A slicer is just like a filter where we can turn on the information that's being shown, turn it on and off. So if I click insert slicer, I can insert as many as I want. In this case, I'm going to use the same one that I did with a filter, the segment. And now it's this kind of little button box right here that lists all the segments that are shown. And I can turn on or turn off which segments are being shown in my pivot table. I can go one at a time, or I can click this little multi-select and select multiple. But I can turn on and off which segment or which filter or which option is being shown in that pivot table. It functions just like the filter. The only difference is that a slicer, if you wanted a filter, that value can also not be a row. If you want it to show up here, it won't show up down here. But it can if you want to use it as a slicer. So you can have a slicer. I could have the product name as a slicer and also have it down here as a row, but I couldn't as a filter, if that makes sense. I know those are weird terms, but that's the benefit of a slicer. And it's just a little bit more intuitive. It's a button I click and it turns on and off. The other option is go to Pivot Table Analyze and insert a timeline. So a timeline is going to look for any date fields that you may have included in your pivot table or in your data set, in which case I have one date field. It's called date. And I'm going to click that. And now I have just kind of like a slicer. I'm going to move this out of the way, maybe. Thank you. I have a timeline where I can turn on and off which dates are being displayed in the pivot table. Right now it's displayed by months, but I can display it by years, just 2013 and 2014, by quarters, all 4 quarters of both those 2 years, by months, all 12 months of all 2 years, or even by days. And I can make this bigger if I want to look at it by months. And I could say, just show me January through June of 2014. And it took all that data, and now it just showed me that 6-month window of sales by product, by country, with some and average of sales. So you can really try to break it down. This becomes interactive. So you can turn on filters, turn off filters, turn on timelines, turn off timelines, and you're really drilling into the information, but it's in a really fast fashion. So you're not having to do formulas and do work to actually get to the answers that you need. It's all right here. So click in the pivot table, turn on and off your field list. That's your nerve center right here, on and off. Insert slicers and timelines. Use these guys right here. Your core is you got to have a row and a value. At a minimum, you've got to have a row and a value. That's just going to tell Excel to do some work for you. But you can add filters, you can add columns. Columns get really wonky really fast. It's going to actually give you a column for every instance of that thing that shows. So I'll just show you an example of that. If I wanted to show my products by columns instead of country, instead of as rows, you can see that it becomes really busy. So I have all these columns now instead of being grouped in rows. I'm going to undo that. I don't like that. So I don't use columns much, but they're there. And then you have all these value fields of sums, counts, averages. To access those, you right click, go to the field settings, and decide which kind of field you want it to be displayed, what kind of math you want Excel to do, and what you want it to be displayed. I finished before 7. We've got about 5 minutes. What else do you want to see either on pivot tables or charts and graphs that would be helpful to you? That was a lot. It's worth your time just to investigate. You're going to get this file. So you're going to be able to play around with this data set and these pivot tables. And I would encourage you to spend some time. They're super fun. At least I think they are. And they show a lot of information really quickly, and you can really change it on the fly. So get used to manipulating these, and it becomes fun. So you'll get this file. But if you have any questions, either raise your hand or put in the chat what your question is. And know that I'm here if you have specific questions or have specific needs for your business or organization, just to reach out to me. You have my email, and I'm happy to hop on a Zoom call and talk through whatever it is that you need. All right. Hope you got it. Thanks for your time. Thanks for giving me some of your evening tonight. Dara, I don't know if you have any closing words, but thanks for the opportunity to be here and spend some time with you folks in Eastern Montana. It's always fun. And I hope we can do it again. Hope we can get out there at some point in the near future and spend some time with you in person. We're here as M&A, and I'm here as a trainer for any additional help that you might need.
Thank you so much for the last two
Yeah.
evenings, Adam. As always, it's wonderful having you guys present. So thank you so much. And thank you everybody for hanging in there with us for 2 evenings.
Yeah.
All right. Have a good night, y'all.
See y'all.